All right, today we're diving into one of the most dramatic, most consequential events in world history, the fall of Tenochtitlan, the incredible capital of the Aztec Empire. This is the story of how a city of hundreds of thousands, the absolute center of a mighty civilization, was brought to its knees. But here's the thing, this wasn't just a simple story of a few outsiders showing up and winning. Oh no, it was way more complicated than that.
Okay, so just to set the stage, you have to understand how improbable this whole thing was. On one side, you've got the Spanish-led force in 1521. We're talking maybe 1,000 soldiers, 100 horses, and a handful of cannons. And on the other side, the Aztec Empire, defending its capital with, get this, an estimated 80,000 warriors in a city built on a lake, a natural fortress. I mean, on paper, this shouldn't have even been a fight.
So what gives? How does that happen? Well, the answer isn't just about guns and steel. It's this wild mix of brilliant strategy, deep-seated political rivalries, an invisible biological weapon, and just a burning desire for revenge. Our story really kicks off not with that final bloody siege, but 2 years earlier, with what honestly looked like a completely doomed expedition right from the start.
So, April 1519, Hernán Cortés hits the shores of Mexico with just over 500 guys. Now, he didn't just start marching blindly. He was smart. He immediately started playing on local rivalries, and he formed this absolutely crucial alliance with the Tlaxcalans, who were bitter enemies of the Aztecs. This let him march all the way to Tenochtitlan itself, where the Emperor Moctezuma II actually welcomes him peacefully. But then, just 6 days later, in one of the gutsiest moves in history, Cortés takes the emperor hostage inside his own palace.
Yeah, holding an emperor hostage in his own capital, well, that's a powder keg waiting for a spark. The Spanish were walking on a razor's edge. And, spoiler alert, it was about to snap.
And that spark came when Cortés had to leave the city for a bit. He left his second-in-command, Pedro de Alvarado, in charge. Alvarado, fearing a revolt, made this just catastrophic decision. He ordered his men to attack and murder thousands of unarmed Aztec nobles and priests right in the middle of a huge religious festival. And just like that, any pretense of peace was completely gone, shattered. The city just exploded. The Aztecs rose up with absolute fury, trapping the Spanish and their allies in the palace. Their only way out was a desperate, chaotic flight for their lives. And that retreat? It was an absolute disaster for the Spanish. On the night that became known as La Noche Triste, the Night of Sorrows, Aztec warriors attacked them relentlessly. You've got these soldiers weighed down by all the gold they'd stolen getting picked off on the causeways. More than 860 Spanish soldiers were killed, plus over 1,000 of their Tlaxcalan allies. The entire expedition was nearly wiped out. But here's where the story takes a wild turn. You'd think they were done for, right? Wrong. This massive defeat actually set the stage for the 2 key factors that would seal Tenochtitlan's fate. So first up, those alliances. The survivors didn't just flee Mexico. They limped back to the safety of their Tlaxcalan allies. Now, the Aztecs sent messengers, basically saying, hey, turn on these guys, help us finish them off. But the Tlaxcalans, they doubled down. They saw their chance to finally help destroy their old rivals once and for all. And this right here, this shows you the new reality of the war. When Cortés came back, his force was a Spanish-led coalition, sure, but it was overwhelmingly indigenous. We're talking an army of maybe 50,000 to 200,000 warriors from other city-states who were sick of Aztec rule. So you gotta understand, this wasn't just a Spanish conquest anymore. It had become a massive civil war, with the Spanish leading one side. The second factor was an invisible killer: smallpox. It had been brought over by one of the Spanish soldiers, and it just spread like wildfire. The Aztecs called it the Huey Ahuizotl, the Great Rash. They had zero natural immunity, and it was about to tear their empire apart from the inside. The devastation it's hard to even imagine. The epidemic killed an estimated 40% of the population in the valley, sometimes in just a few weeks. It didn't just kill warriors, it killed their leaders, including the new emperor. The city was left grieving, weakened, and in total chaos, right as Cortés was getting ready to launch his final attack. So in May of 1521, Cortés and his massive allied army returned. But this time, they weren't going for a quick grab. No, they were there to lay siege to the city and to slowly, brutally choke it into submission. And his strategy was methodical and just absolutely ruthless. First, he builds a navy on a lake, 13 small warships to control the water and cut off all their canoe traffic. Then, he destroys the aqueducts, cutting off the city's fresh water. His troops blockade the causeways so no food can get in. And finally, as they advance, they just tear the city down, level it, house by house, filling in the canals, leaving the defenders with no cover, nowhere to hide.
The fighting was something out of a nightmare. The Spanish and their allies could actually watch from a distance as their captured friends were dragged up the steps of the Great Temple to be sacrificed. You can just feel the horror in those words from one of Cortés's soldiers. This wasn't just war, it was personal, and it fueled this incredible cycle of hatred on both sides.
After nearly 3 months of this hell, of starvation, thirst, and nonstop fighting, the city's defenses finally crumbled. On August 13, 1521, Tenochtitlan fell, but the end of the siege was not the end of the killing. The human cost, when you look at the numbers, is just staggering. Over the whole campaign, the Spanish lost maybe 1,000 men, their native allies maybe 20,000. But the Aztec losses were astronomical. As many as 250,000 people were killed, warriors and civilians. Almost the entire Aztec nobility and warrior class was just gone. And that final wave of slaughter, it wasn't primarily carried out by the Spanish. It was their indigenous allies, the Tlaxcalans and others, who unleashed generations of pent-up hatred on the defeated Aztecs, slaughtering thousands of civilians in a brutal final act of revenge. And don't just take my word for it. Listen to what Cortés himself wrote in a letter to the emperor. He claimed his men tried to stop the killing, but they were outnumbered 150 to 1 by their allies and were totally powerless to stop the massacre. That one sentence, it tells you everything you need to know about the brutal dynamics that were at play.
So when you look back at all this, what do you see? The fall of Tenochtitlan wasn't a simple story of a few hundred conquistadors toppling an empire. It was a perfect storm, political genius, a devastating plague, and a massive internal rebellion, all crashing together in a brutal siege. It leaves us with this big question that historians still debate. What do you even call this? Was it a foreign conquest? Was it a rebellion of oppressed peoples? Or was it an act of genocide? It was a pivotal moment that reshaped a continent, leaving a legacy that we are all still wrestling with today.